In this video, I'd like to look at a solution to a problem I call the electric bill estimator, just a little made-up problem with a lot of little cases for an intro JavaScript course. And there are lots of solutions to it, so it's a nice problem in that way. And what I'm going to show you a solution that uses, in terms of the drop-down list, and add an opt group. And we'll see what that does. And in terms of the JavaScript, uses a switch statement. Okay, so the Word document sort of just spelling out the problem can be found at this URL, and then this solution can be found at that URL. So here is the problem. There are different types of houses. A single house sort of stands alone. The duplex will share a wall with another house, and the row will share walls on both sides. And so that will affect the bill, assuming that part of the electric bill is going towards heat. And then that bill will also be affected by the season of the year, more in the winter, less in the spring, summer, and fall, and less in the summer they're using air conditioning. And then we're just breaking it up into categories. If it's a single house, fall and spring are 50, the winter is 250, the summer is 50, but if they have central air, it's 200, etc. So don't know that these numbers make any sense, but it's just a problem with lots of different cases to be taken care of. Okay, and so here's the little interface, and they're using a drop-down select to choose both the house type and season sort of in one drop-down select. And here is this opt group, these sort of bold categories that you can't choose, but they sort of categorize the options. And I want to show you how I got that opt group. And again, this is sort of the effect of the opt group, this bold label here categorizing this list. Doesn't affect the way, it's not an option you can choose. It doesn't affect the way the drop-down select is coded, but it's just sort of a different look for a sort of a more complicated drop-down list. So another way I might solve this problem is to have two drop-down lists, one for the type of house and one for the season of year. But in this approach, I wanted to combine them all into one drop-down, but sort of have some sort of categories of options to make it a little clearer to the user what they are selecting. A checkbox for whether they have central air or not. And so if you had if it was spring and you had a double duplex, you would pay, your estimate would be 40. In the summer, that's when it matters. So if you make a new choice, you're clearing out your answer. If it's summer and single and you have central air, it's 200. But if you don't have central air, it clears out the answer and it's less. So that is the sort of game here, just breaking it up into all of the possible cases. I have a little bit of style for my colors. Collapse that. The sort of new stuff is the opt group, and then down in the code, the switch statement. So I have some W3 school links for that. So here's my drop-down select. I give it an ID of cell type. I give it an on change to clear out. And then here are the opt groups. So I have my normal drop-down select has options. They have what's between open option and close option is what the user sees, and the value is what we use behind the scenes. So I've decided to give each of these sort of a code. S for single, 0, 1, 2, 3 for winter, spring, summer, fall, and then D for duplex, and so on. So this is the normal sort of drop-down list stuff. but now we have sort of put the options into these categories using the opt group tag. So there's an open opt group and a close opt group. So that puts the options into a category. That leads to this indenting here. So these belong to that first sort of category or group. And then the label of the opt group is what you sort of see at the top. And again, it's not an option, so the user can't choose it, but it serves to sort of group or categorize one's options. Okay, so, and I've decided to, instead of writing a lot out, single house in winter in terms of my values are my behind the scenes thing. And so I can make them simpler so that it's easier for me to code. Maybe just a comment here or there to tell myself what's going on, but I tend to misspell words, so a simpler code is better for me. Okay. So the drop-down select has an on-change calling clear out. The checkbox has an on-click calling clear out, and then the button has an on-click calling estimate. Let's look at clear out. That's the easy one. I go to the text area. This is a leftover from my student choosing. They tend to like text areas. It's a text area just for a display, so we made it read only, rows and columns, gave it an ID. I like to work with text areas with the value. And so here's me clearing it out. Well, not completely clearing it out, but replacing whatever there is with 3 equals. So we see if we change anything, we get the 3 equals. So that's the clear out. Now let's do the estimate function, which is from clicking the button. Okay, so we are going to the normal code, drop down, select, and getting. So the opt groups don't affect the way you code in JavaScript, the drop down select. We are going to the page, finding the element with the ID cell type, grabbing its value, and that's those codes like D_2 or something. I have a variable bill, which will be the amount of the bill, which I will determine in my different cases. And now comes the switch. So I have a switch. My switch is based on the variable kind. Kind was a string. And so then I start finding out what the possible values of kind are and breaking them into cases. So this is in lieu of like an if, else if, else if, else if kind of approach. Switch cases are typically sort of a mutually exclusive thing, though sometimes 2 or 3 cases might be combined, and I will show that. But so this like 69 and 70 are sort of the if, if we were working with ifs, it would be the equivalent of if open parenthesis kind equal quote capital S_0 close quote, etc. So this is asking if the variable kind is equal to S0, then what do I do? I set the bill equal to 250, and then I break, and that's sort of like working not just with ifs, but if and else if, so that if this is what I've done in this switch statement, then I break, I leave the switch statement, I get out, I don't do anything more. So I don't have to bother. If this was my case, S_0, if it was a single in winter, then I'm done with the switch and I don't do any more. That's the sort of purpose of the break. And here is me combining 2 cases, the S1 and the S3, which is spring and fall for a single house. And I can do that by sort of not breaking, by having this one case followed immediately by this other case. And the first case had no break. And so then the setting of the bill to 50 happens for both of these cases. And then I break out. And so this is the equivalent of a Boolean OR. So you could say if the season was spring or if the season was fall, do this. And so we can combine cases. So in ifs, it was a Boolean or. Here, it's just two cases back to back without a break in between. Here is the case for summer, S_2. And then that's where I had some follow-up. So I ask, so I can have any amount of code. So for a lot of these cases, I just set what the bill is and I break. But I can do any amount of coding in here. And so when it's summer, then I have to do additional coding and ask if they are using the air or not. And that was on the page a checkbox. So we're going to the page, getting the element, which was the checkbox, and asking whether or not it's checked. And if it was checked, the bill was 200. And if not, then it was 50. Okay, and then we break, we're done with the case. And then we just have more cases, but these cases look pretty much the same. Here, all these cases are just for duplex instead of a single home, but it's all the same structure. So there's not anything code-wise to see here then, but sort of just more cases being taken care of. And again, the same for row. Row in winter, row in spring, row in fall, row in summer. In the summer, we have to know whether or not they're using their air conditioning. When we're done with a case and we're completely done, then we break so that we don't ask any more questions in our case statement. A case statement, a switch statement, I should say, allows for a default case, which is just the sort of catch-all at the bottom. And I think I've done all my cases, all my types of houses and seasons of the year. And so my default case is just an alert that says something went wrong. So I should hopefully never see that. Another good thing to do might be to throw a comment in the console. Get yourself a good tester to test all the possible cases of your user using your interface. And then this 118 down here, that's the end of the switch statement that matches the beginning up here, 69. And then by then I should have established the bill for all my cases. And I am taking the bill, adding 2 zeros to it, or showing 2 decimal places, which for these are adding 2 zeros on the end, concatenating a $sign in front, and making that the value of the text area bill. And we already saw the clear out. So that's what I wanted to show you. And the new stuff in this solution, again, this is a problem with a number of ways of solving it, which makes it a nice problem. But we're using one dropdown to choose both the type of house and the season. And then to make that a little clearer to the user, we brought in the HTML optgroup to sort of put them in categories, to put our options in sort of clearer categories with the bold, the indenting, and that style just sort of comes automatically. That's not part of my styling. And then in JavaScript, working with the switch statement in the cases. Sort of, we could have handled this with ifs and else ifs, but this is another way of doing it. That's what I wanted to show you. Thanks for your attention.